Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're going to be running a Dexterity build using a Poison and Rot Nagakiba. So at the beginning of a fight, we're going to be trying to go for the Poisonous Mist Ash of War with the Poison Infused Nagakiba, and that's going to proc Poison very, very early, and then immediately we'll switch over to our Keen Nagakiba, and that's going to have better Dex scaling. The Poison one only has B scaling, the Keen has A scaling, so that's going to be nice for our AR, and we'll be able to use something like Drawstring Rot Grease or regular Rot Grease, and then go for something like Spinning Slash, which is also going to apply that status effect very, very quickly. And in both instances, we'll be able to proc the AR boost that comes with our Mushroom Crown, as well as our Kindred Rot's Exaltation. You'll also note that I have an offhand misericord, so this dagger does have the longest range out of any dagger. However, I also like it because if you use something like the Wakizashi, it forces you into the power stance moveset that's associated with dual katanas. So for me, it's just preferable to have the offhand dagger that functions completely as a dagger, where you can spam L1 and it just kind of continuously uses the left-hand weapon and doesn't incorporate the right-hand weapon. So that's just preference on my end, but if you would like the power stance moveset, then the Wakizashi would be a good option. Some quick notes on the build. This is a pure Dexterity build, so we do have 65 Dexterity with an extra 5 added from Millicent's Prosthesis. We are going to be going for the Successive Attack buff stacking route, so we do have both these two talismans as well as the Thorny Cracked Tear in our Mixed Physic, and then we just have the Great Jar's Arsenal to boost our equip load. As for the armor, we have the Tree Sentinel Greaves, the Royal Remains Gauntlets, the Tree Sentinel Armor, and the Mushroom Crown, and then we will have a Clawmark Seal that we can use for something like Magic Fortification or Bestial Vitality. I just find that that's a nice buff to have on hand and can be useful if you're starting out a fight. That pretty much covers everything that I wanted to say about the build. Let's go ahead and see how it does in the invasions and arena content. Alright, so jumping into our first invasion, we have some mutual respect coming from the fellow Mushroom Crown wearer, and it's definitely nice to see that whenever I do see somebody wearing a Mushroom Crown. I'm pretty happy to see it. It's, just a nice fashion statement, and I feel like it's a little bit of a club. So we do get a Giant Hunt coming out from the Mushroom Crown wearer, and we do have some spells and incantations coming from the other players. So we do see that the other Phantom and the Host are playing fairly passively and kind of hanging out in the back. So being able to force everybody into this long, narrow hallway where everybody's going to get in each other's way is definitely beneficial in terms of isolating our opponents and being able to just kind of deal with one player at a time, which is definitely going to be beneficial. So I've already procced the poison, so I switch over to the Keen Nagakiba and use Spinning Slash with Rot, and we can just see how effective that is. We are getting the successive attack bonuses, and very quickly we're just kind of able to melt both Phantoms and just avoid some of the incoming damage coming from the Host. And now that it's just a one-on-one, it's not too bad. We're able to stance break our opponent with the shield and then grab the riposte and finish that off and grab the W. So that was just a nice 3v1 involving another Mushroom Crown wearer, so I thought I'd put it at the beginning of the showcase. Next up we have another 3v1, and this involves some quite a bit of magic, and we try to start things out by using the Great Bow and just getting some chip damage, but it doesn't really go our way. We get hit with the Madness Snipe while we're trying to drink our Physic, which, the range on the Madness Snipe and the quickness of it is fairly difficult to deal with, especially with how good of tracking it has. So not being aware of that going into it was a little bit to our detriment, so we have to kind of reset back to neutral, grab some Madness Boluses, and just make sure that our health is pretty close to topped off. And now we can begin our kind of original game plan, which is going to be to deliver Poisonous Mist and then switch our Nagakiba over to the Keen one and potentially get some Rot involved. So we're kind of waiting for the right moment when everybody is, not just attacking me over and over again to deliver Poisonous Mist, and we do end up getting the poison proc, so our AR is now boosted a bit, and we get a couple quick hits in just while the two players are at the top of the hill, so we don't have to worry about the incoming spells or incantations from them, and then we can switch over to our Nagakiba and potentially involve Spinning Slash a little bit. What's really nice about the successive attack bonuses is when you are able to clip multiple opponents at the same time, that contributes to higher successive attack AR increase. So it counts once for each time it connects with another player. So if you have two players getting kind of blendered by that Spinning Slash, then it's going to increase your AR even faster. So we take advantage of that pretty pretty early on and are able to turn this into a 1v1. And here I switch over to a shield in my main hand. I just feel like this player is going to be a potential good option to parry. So I try to pressure a little bit, go for some hits with it and bait them into some predictable attack timings. And then they go for Moonveil, which is definitely a predictable attack. I'm able to parry that and then switch over to a Muser Accord, grab the riposte, and then just do a fancy spin because I was feeling pretty good about that one. So next up we have another one that starts as a 2v1, but a blue will be coming into the world. And the host and the phantom are dealing with some ants, which are kind of treacherous PvE, especially the flying ones. They can be pretty annoying to deal with. So we have that kind of as our advantage, and landing the poisonous mist poison proc is not such a big deal. It's pretty easy when you have everybody just kind of in a cluster dealing with both PvE and Invader. And we are able to go for a delayed running heavy. I think delaying running heavies can be a very strong way to finish your opponent. And even if you miss, oftentimes you'll get the phantom proc. So if you do have something like Rot in the mix, then it means it's just going to be even more of that Rot buildup incorporated, even if the damage isn't, and that proves to be enough to take care of the blue. And then here we can just see Spinning Slash again being extremely useful. It's really just like a spin to win play style with this build, but the added benefit of, you know, the AR boosts from the Mushroom Crown and the Kindred Rot Talisman, as well as the successive attack boosts, it all just really comes together to be a really strong build, one that I had a lot of fun using, and, you know, I haven't really gone for too many of the spin to win type play styles, so this was just like a very easy one for me to kind of pick up and enjoy, since it was so, you know, poison and rot focused, which is really just a playstyle that I enjoy quite a bit. So next up we have another 3v1. We're able to get a guard break pretty early in this invasion and just grab some high damage riposte, which is definitely nice. We have some kind of passive play, so I go ahead and throw some freezing pots. I definitely like to encourage them to get aggressive. And we have one of the phantoms go for a neutral attack out of Giant Hunt, but I'm able to punish that with Spinning Slash by just, you know, hitting that L2 button a little bit faster than they are able to get that hyper armor associated with the Gug's Greatsword. So that was a nice moment there where, you know, just knowing the speed and poise damage of my weapon was kind of the difference maker in eliminating that phantom. And that turns it into a 2v1. And we do see some parry attempts as well as some wild strike attempts from the host there. So I'm able to just kind of wiggle a little bit, and I definitely recommend that as a way to kind of psych your opponent out and then go for that delayed running attack. And that's enough to grab the damage we need to take care of the phantom and move on to pressuring the host. And here I think the host got maybe a little demoralized. They start backing off, and I go for some more frost pots. You know, the fact that you're using a keen Nagakiba, it's really nice to have the frostbite in the mix as well as the other status effects. So the host at this point just kind of gives up, and we're able to come out with the W there. So Lionel, not as brave as we once thought, but that's all right. Next up we have another 3v1, and there's two players using the Radahn's Greatsword, so we have to be worried about the gravity attacks. Here we do get caught in the initial part, but don't get killed by the follow-up, which was definitely a nice thing to see. And we're able to get our Poison Cloud out in the mix and poison proc the player with Malenia's Greatsword, or Katana rather. And then here we go for a quick knowledge check of the level. We go for the jump, and that frequently trips people up. If you don't jump, then you'll just fall down that like ladder area, and that's a great way to isolate opponents. And that gives us the time to grab a backstab on the player with the Radahn sword. So that follow-up is pretty delayed with their Ash of War, so being able to, you know, go for a backstab in that instance, I find there's a very high success rate for that. Even after, I think, patch 1.09 mentioned that they increased the timing associated with the follow-up for the Radahn Ash of War. So despite that kind of quicker movement, backstabs are still not too bad to grab, and we are able to take care of that phantom and then begin pressure on the player with Malenia's Katana here. So we do get a nice frost pot proc. The freezing pots are great to counter that particular Ash of War. I use them all the time. It's common in the boss fight, and it's common in invasions if you want it to be, and I definitely recommend it. And then here we actually get the blood loss proc. So despite the fact that we aren't running like a bleed build at all, we have level 10 arcane, we still managed to get the bleed, which, you know, it's important to remember that on top of all the different status effects that we are running, katanas have some innate bleed buildup, so that was pretty nice to see. And moving on, we have another invasion here, starting off with the great bow, just to get some chip damage. We shoot another shot here, and I believe it hits the shield, so no extra chip damage there. And then here I was hoping they'd go the other way, but they went right, so we don't get any damage there. But we switch over to our katana and do manage to poise break them right before they're able to land their attack, and we get the poison proc. So that means we can switch our katana over and begin the process of getting some rot damage. There I was a little bit surprised by the amount of poise damage that was delivered from that particular incantation with the black flame, but it was alright. We were able to kind of get into a spot where we could turn and burn as our opponents come around the corner. And honestly, spinning strike is just so useful in invasions. I hadn't really used it too much, but the fact that it just has the full 360 high poise damage attack movement, it's just kind of unbelievably how helpful that is when you're dealing with 3 opponents that can really be coming at you from any angle. So we do have a second there to just heal up and restore our FP. We take a quick trade, and then just the roll catch with the spinning slash it's so strong. So we're able to take care of one of the phantoms, and then we do have some pressure coming in from the host and the phantom. They've got the power stance straight swords, but we do have kind of our big-eyed friends coming in, and they are able to land blight on the host, and I'm able to get a quick kill on the phantom. So shout out to the basilisks in that one. The real heroes just kind of turning hosts into trees. We're definitely happy to see that. So next up we have a 2v1, and this group was definitely ganking. I encountered them a couple times before, and I'm able to get quite a bit of damage coming in on this phantom before they really were ready. We do get the poison proc, or the rot proc rather. However, the chip damage is not quite enough, and the pressure from the host means that we're not able to chase them down successfully. But we do go for another spinning slash here, and we're getting our AR boosted just by the number of successive attacks. And here, I believe we might have gotten the bleed proc on that phantom as well. So all those successive attacks really added up quickly, and it was pretty useful. So you will note that I don't always go for the poisonous mist at the beginning of invasions, and if it's a particularly difficult group, or if I know that it's a 3v1, I might just switch straight to the key Nagakiba. And I recommend that if you don't think you're going to have time to switch weapons, or you just need that higher AR associated with the key Nagakiba over the poisonous one. So we are able to get some spinning slash on the player with the power stance straight swords, and then kind of reset back to neutral, grab some space, avoid the incoming rot breath, and then also go for some frost procs on the phantoms and the host. And here we're able to get just a nice jumping light attack on the phantom here as they go for rot breath again, and we do get a running heavy, which guard breaks them, and we grab the riposte, which is kind of the difference maker for that phantom. And again, we do need to kind of slow down a little bit, wait for some time to heal, and just kind of avoid the incoming damage from the jumping attacks on the hosts. And we are incorporating the dagger just a little bit for some chip damage. I found the dagger to be more useful in the context of duels rather than invasions. It could be useful, but the Nagakiba is a pretty quick weapon to start with, so oftentimes in invasions you would be able to grab the damage with the Nagakiba rather than the dagger, and it wouldn't really be necessary to grab that chip damage. But either way, I definitely found it was nice to have on hand, and I'll probably be using offhand daggers a little bit more in future builds, particularly with slower weapons like greatswords or curved greatswords. Those really benefit from having the faster option on hand. So next up we have a 2v1, and this one is going to involve another Mushroom Crown wearer, but they definitely weren't as polite when we entered the world. They weren't excited to see me. It was kind of a disappointment, so we do end up having to kill them pretty quickly. We do then go after the player with the dual curved swords, and we're able to land one more spinning slash, and then we can kind of just hang out for a second as we let the rot proc do the rest. And that was just a nice successful 2v1 with another Mushroom Crown wearer. So moving on, we have kind of an odd shot from the great bow here. It goes right into that kind of invisible space next to the wall, and then the host does roll the second shot while I'm getting some pressure from this phantom with the twin blades. So here I go for some drawstring rot grease. I do get hit by one of their spells, which does quite a bit of damage, but I continue with the spin to win. It kind of behooves you to continuously use that until the other players are out of range, just because every time you are landing a hit or even a phantom hit, you are getting that added successive attack bonus to your AR. So even if just the last hit clips, it's going to be much stronger than the first one, and it just makes sense to do that. So here, as the phantom falls, we go for a very delayed light attack, and that just one single swing was enough to take care of that last phantom. And now it's just me and the host along with some PvE, and the PvE in this area is, it's nothing to sneeze at. It does quite a bit of damage, and we do switch over to our poisonous Nagakiba. This player is not poisoned in any capacity, and I felt that the poisonous mist might be a good move to both zone our opponent, like kind of deter them from moving forward through the level, and that proves to be true. They end up running back towards the tree avatar, and that was kind of their fatal mistake. So we do get a little bit of help from the PvE there, and we were able to kind of just discourage that opponent from moving forward throughout the level just with kind of the poisonous mist. So here we have a less than sneaky phantom that goes for the mimic veil while I'm like 2 feet away. So definitely a bold move there. We do see a little bit of aim punch coming in from their halberd. So if you're unfamiliar with aim punch, it's this kind of effect in the game that nobody likes, where you miss your attack even though you're locked on and like facing your opponent, because you're receiving incoming damage. So aim punch is something that happens predominantly with weapons that have like an overhead slash attack, and some people try to encourage aim punch to be happening more frequently by using stuff like the Briar armor, which does have little hits every time you approach your opponent. So that's just something that's good to be aware of. It happened in that moment with the player with the halberd, and was actually it was pretty helpful in terms of me getting extra damage and not getting poise broken. So we do have a blue that does come into the world, and they're going for some pretty high damage attacks with the dual greatsword setup. That jumping attack with power stance greatswords is gonna do close to half my health pretty much every single time, and it's blues are typically higher level than their hosts and oftentimes the invaders, so it makes sense that they're delivering quite a bit of damage, and it's unclear what other talismans they might be running to kind of boost that a little bit further. The claw talisman on hand wouldn't be a bad option if you're going for a playstyle like that. So I need to be very aware of how they're moving and just kind of where they are. But we do have this PvE archer that comes into the world, as well as an AFK blue. So that's just kind of very quintessential at this point. Blues coming into the world being completely AFK and delivering free Estus to the invader. It's a nice element of the game that we see quite often. And we do have some attacks with the Guardian Tree Spear halberd, which does come out very quick, but has kind of a weird hitbox. So I'm able to kind of just strafe it and then deliver the final hit. So not getting poise broken there was definitely key for delivering that final blow. And then here we start going for some spinning slash, but the archer is really just putting in work and hits the host 3 times in a row, and we come out with a W. So PvE in this area is quite dangerous, and if you don't really respect it or avoid it, then you're going to be taking quite a bit of damage. So next up we have a 2v1 in Limgrave. Definitely some gankers setting up using some power stance curve swords, and those can be pretty scary. They're not too bad if you're going to try to parry them, but we do have some latency with definitely the host and perhaps a little bit with the phantom, so it doesn't really make sense to do that. But the phantom is running a pretty low poise build, and Nagakiba against a low poise build is just, it's going to be extremely hard to deal with. I think it's one of the most difficult weapons to deal with if you are running a low poise build, just because it poise breaks you so frequently, it comes out so fast, and the damage is pretty high. So we do eventually manage to get the host. I'm not sure if it was with the offhand dagger or not. It was really hard to tell given the latency, but one of those hits does eventually arrive, and the last bit of damage kind of takes care of that host. So next up we have a phantom that's kind of treating this as a 1v1. Again, a little bit of latency with these players, and they're kind of just like rolling off into the sunset, but the host does come in and start going for the Radon Greatsword attacks. I'm not sure if the host went for anything other than L2s throughout the course of this invasion, so keep an eye out for that, and feel free to let me know in the comments if you do see them use something like an R1 or a heavy attack. But for now, they're going for the Bloodhound Fang L2, and I do try to space that appropriately so I can get a backstab, and then the Phantom is coming in for some more attacks. I think I probably would have gotten the Phantom there if the PvE hadn't interrupted, but this bird is honestly pretty funny, so I don't really mind, and that causes a bit of a distraction. So we do see some more L2s from the host, and I do believe that might have been a few light attacks, so I'm eating my words there, but you know, it was definitely a theme throughout the invasion, and we do go for some L2s ourselves, and the bird just comes in and pecks them both to death. So coming out on top there was a nice win, and I just give a shout out to the bird there. Moving on, we have the duels portion of the showcase, and this first player is going to be running a Faith build. They go for some pre-buffs and then immediately start with aggression, so they're able to get a light attack off. I'm able to go for a delayed heavy attack, which does connect and do a little bit of damage, but they do have the Erdtree's protection on, which does kind of prevent a lot of the incoming damage that I'd like to be doing to take place. So we have some usage of Black Flame Tornado, which is not a bad wake up, and we do have the poison procced at this point, so switching over to the Keen Nagakiba is a good move. And here we can see, despite the fact that they were almost right in my face, they're able to utilize Erdtree's heal, so they get most of their HP back, and I definitely feel like Erdtree's heal is a bit of an unfair advantage in the context of the arena, just because there's really not a good way to punish it. Potentially you can get a backstab on it, but for the most part, you're not really going to be able to either prevent them from doing it or, you know, deliver enough damage to kind of outweigh the HP that they get back from that particular incantation. So I would love to see a change to that. Maybe just, you know, give it more recovery frames, make it more punishable, so you can't just Erdtree heal in somebody's face and still come out on top with that HP boost. So eventually we are able to, you know, maintain our aggression. We're at very low health, so we have to be wary of that, but we get a nice jumping attack there, and then we do come in for kind of the final blow here with just a delayed light attack, and that's enough to kill them. So normally I don't point down, you know, I had to go into my menu to find where that emote was, but given that particular play style and the fact that they use it twice in you know, Coliseum duel was just a little bit frustrating. But moving on, we have a player using the Tree Sentinel Halberd as well as a Great Shield, so kind of an interesting build that you don't often see in the arena, and we do get some running attacks. I try to punish it with a backstab, but that is definitely going to be latency dependent. I find that those backstabs are more frequently whiffed than not, and it's often a good idea to just kind of ignore them completely and go for some chip damage. So here we can see I'm utilizing the offhand dagger a little bit more, and getting that chip damage is definitely nice. This player does a great job of utilizing a bolus and not getting punished for it, so they do have kind of no poison at this point, and that allowed them to continue to pressure for a little while, where if they hadn't used that bolus, they definitely would have died from the poison. Their HP was very low, but we still do manage to come out on top. So next up we have a player with some polite greetings at the beginning of this showcase. So I believe this is another content creator, so I thought I'd include them in my showcase. I believe it's Soulsborne_TV is their account, so if you want to check them out, definitely feel free. But they're, you know, we're kind of just having fun with this duel. It's not super serious. They go for some pokes with the Zweihander and then followed up with the delayed heavy, which is definitely a great move. It can frequently catch people off guard. I do get the poison proc in, and they switch over to a Mushroom Crown out of respect, which I absolutely appreciate. The Mushroom Crown does not give you an AR boost if you've already been poisoned. It just happens during the proc, so I'm not sure what the idea was there, but I do like it. And then there we can see that little bit of chip damage from the offhand dagger is enough to get them to pretty low health. They're poisoned at this point and just felt they wanted to hang out and let that do the rest. So a fun duel there for sure. And moving on, we have a player with the Moonlight Greatsword, and when you encounter mages in the arena, they oftentimes have a pretty good plan for what to do if you're extremely aggressive. So it behooves you to really just kind of wait and see, let them use up some of their FP, and then wait for a good time to strike. So there I was able to grab the poison proc and then switch my Nagakiba and start going for Spinning Slash, and we're like very far ahead in this duel now health-wise, and we can just land a nice heavy attack that finishes them off. The range on that heavy attack is quite nuts, so being able to land one of those is going to really do you some favors. So we do go for the early poison proc. We get punished during that Ash of War, but we're able to get in some quick hits during the Adula's Moonblade, which I definitely like the fact that, you know, there's quite a bit of time between the first and the second attacks, and oftentimes you'll be able to get in just like a light attack of your own and then roll again before the second part, even if they don't get poise broken. So here I didn't delay my roll long enough. They went for a more charged version of Carrion Piercer, so I definitely ate quite a bit of damage there. And here I was nice and patient for the Cannon of Haema, waited for it to get fired, and then began pressuring again. This time I do get the timing correct on the Carrion Piercer, and then managed to just grab two hits with the Spinning Slash, and we can just kind of appreciate how good that is as a roll catch, especially if they get poise broken during the first part. Then that kind of second follow-up part is going to do quite a bit of damage. This next player is running very low poise, so they're going to be susceptible to most of these katana attacks and probably have a pretty hard time. So here we poise break again, we get all 3 hits, and then they don't roll out fast enough, so we're able to grab just another light attack and flawless that opponent. So moving on, we have another player with some pretty good fashion here. We can definitely appreciate the setup that they've got going, and some power stance straight swords. So here I'm trying to space them and grab the poison proc, so we don't actually do any damage with that Ash of War, but they are still doing their Ash of War inside that poison cloud, and we get the AR boost as well as that added pressure. And then here we go for a heavy attack as well as the Ash of War, and those two things combo pretty well into each other. They're not a true combo or anything, but it applies quite a bit of pressure. We get that roll catch, and then the running heavy is enough to finish that fight. So next up we have a player with kind of an off-meta setup. I'd definitely like to see the Great Hammer in the mix, and they've definitely got good spacing and timing. The Bestial Sling I'm less excited to see about, but they're not really spamming it or anything, so I do appreciate that kind of you know, self-control, just using it as a periodic like poise break or something. We do get the Spinning Slash to deliver a little bit of damage, and then having that offhand dagger is also nice just because we do have the successive attack bonus going. So if you can get some quick hits in with the offhand dagger, that's going to be a great option. And then here the Ravioli Step does miss, but it does put us in a good position to grab a light attack trade, and that brings us out with another W. So here we have another player here. This is 2 Gifts, and I play them all the time in the arena. They are amazing with the Tree Spear. They're just a very strong player, so I always kind of enjoy seeing them. And here you can see just like their vortex potential. They get me to half health very quickly, and I was able to do very little damage. But I do get the poison proc in, but they are able to bolus it without getting punished very easily. So that's you know, just again a sign of a great player is utilizing that space and time to take advantage of that. And then here I do clip them with the Spinning Slash while my health was pretty low, so happy to come out on top there. But just kind of shout out to 2 Gifts, always a good time seeing you in the arena. So next up we have a player that goes for spinning use of that spell. You know, it's a surprise to everybody, I guess, where it's going to end up, so kind of fun there. And we do get the poison proc as well as a couple light attacks. Switching over to the Spinning Slash option, we do get a couple hits in, and then here we just delay our roll for the Carrion Piercer and grab that second backstab. So a victory there against a player that just kind of made me laugh with that opener. I'm not sure if they catch people with it often, but I love the fact that they're trying. So moving on, we have a player also with an offhand dagger using the Zweihander, and they're able to get me with a nice crouch poke and then some additional damage during their Ash of War. If you can kind of like partially roll that Ash of War if you're close enough, and it doesn't really do as much damage as if Sacred Blade were to hit you straight on. However, I do grab a couple light attacks and trade a little bit with that offhand dagger. So just, you know, the fact that they do have an offhand dagger is kind of scary in this situation because they have some very quick attacks that do low poise damage, but then they also have a very high poise damage attack with a wide array of speeds associated with it. But using that offhand dagger, we're able to get that last bit of chip damage, and that's a moment where I really preferred the fact that it wasn't the wakizashi. It was a moment where I wanted to be able to hit L1 a couple times in a row and not have to worry about, you know, using the power stance katana moveset. So here we do get the poison proc on this player pretty quickly, and they've got a pretty off meta setup. They've got kind of all the big boy weapons. They've got a fingerprint shield along with the giant crusher, but we do manage to stance break them during our Ash of War and grab the riposte. Just kind of a funny build from somebody that was probably a pretty good player, just running something a little bit more fun. So next up we have a shield poker, and that can be a little bit scary to deal with in the arena. It's, you know, you're usually dealing with somebody who's probably got good spacing and timing and is less susceptible to being kicked, in the same way that you can like use the kick Ash of War against a invader or somebody that you would see while invading. So, you know, happy to come out on top there. Using Spinning Slash was definitely the difference maker. Here we have a player that's definitely starting off a little bit more passively. I'm not sure if they're going for buffs or something, but they're kind of running away before it really makes sense to. There they get out the Glintstone Phalanx, and that's definitely a good move. Not something you see on like a halberd off-stock setup too often, but it can be a good pressuring tool, and I think I've seen it more and more at meta just as like a way to get a quick turn and burn. So if your spacing and timing is pretty good, then you may be able to just really utilize that as a way to stance break your opponent and then deliver another hit with the fact that you've just poise broken them with the phalanx. So it can be very deadly, but in this case I didn't fall susceptible to it. I took quite a bit of damage from that frost proc, but did manage to grab a couple hits with the Spinning Slash. So just kind of the range and the speed of Spinning Slash is a bit absurd, and having been a big fan of Unsheath for quite a while, I'm, you know, pretty happy to have found, I mean, I didn't like find Spinning Slash, but for me personally, Spinning Slash is a little bit new, and I definitely prefer it to Unsheath. I think it's a little bit more fun, and especially with the potential to poison or rot proc, it's great. So this is the last duel. We've just got a player with power stance straight swords, and we do go for some of our Spinning Slash a couple times and just manage to deliver a final blow and come out with the W. If you made it this far, I just wanted to say thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions about the build or have any recommendations for future builds, definitely feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm always happy to check those out. But yeah, that's all I've got, and I hope you have a good one.